And welcome to episode 13 of the Addiction Free Naturally podcast. Welcome, my name's Graeme Hoppitt, and today we're going to talk about how to stop relapses forever. So without further ado, the individual topics of it is we're going to talk about the types of relapses because that will help you. But then we'll talk about the primary triggers and then your prevention plan. So into relapses, we're all coming from different walks of life, but, we've got one goal really, we want to stop being passengers in this journey of addiction. Instead, we want to take the driving seat, and understanding what I'm going to share today will help you do that. And I only wish that I knew all of this at the beginning of my journey. It's like hindsight's a wonderful thing. Now, the why relapses are common. In the early days, they're inevitable, to be frank. So having an actionable plan, though, will enable you to sort of overcome those relapses and make you stronger, or at least minimize them. Because in the early stages, as you're working through your addiction, you're going to be exposed to certain triggers, because you probably won't even recognize all the triggers to start with. There's going to be other risk factors that you come into contact with, and all of this is increasing your likelihood of relapsing and falling over. So it's not uncommon for those of us that are struggling to relapse in the early days, at least once. I mean, most people will fall over several times. In fact, if I'm being frank, I relapsed multiple times. And that's why hindsight being a wonderful thing. If I knew this information at the beginning of my journey, I would have made progress quicker and I wouldn't have had the relapses. Now, there's evidence, and there's lots of different evidences out there, but there's evidence that more than 2/3 of people will relapse at least once after their initial treatment. Okay, so whatever method you take, you're likely to relapse at least once. But the idea here is, with this knowledge, once you've got through that early period, then hopefully you won't relapse ever again. Now, what I want to say, and this is probably going to upset a few people, relapse should only happen at the start of your journey out of addiction, because this is about being true to yourself, being honest to yourself. And I wish I'd been honest. I wasn't. That's the problem, and that keeps you trapped. But once you've got past, say, the first 3 months of your recovery plan or your exit plan, whatever you want to call it, if you keep relapsing, then that's telling you that your chosen recovery method is either not working, or maybe you're not actually working that recovery method sufficiently. Maybe you're not 100% committed, or you're not taking full responsibility. But relapse should really only happen in the early periods. And if you relapse multiple times in the early stages, it's not a problem. You've got to show yourself compassion. What's important in those early stages is actually learning the process to get out of it. But once you've got past that early stage, that's where, from now looking from the outside in, I see people when they do relapse, it's because they actually haven't got a plan. So that's why we're, setting out a plan here today, so you don't ever relapse after just that initial period. So I want to just talk a little bit about the difference between relapse and a slip. Now, relapse is when someone, they start, they've had a period of abstinence or sobriety, whatever word you want to call it, and then suddenly they start participating back either in their drug of choice, drugs or alcohol, or in the addictive behavior, sex, porn, shopping, gambling, gaming, whatever it might be for you. So that's a relapse. You've had a period of sobriety and then you collapse. Now, a slip, I would suggest, is slightly different. A slip is where maybe you've had a really extended period of sobriety. Let's say you haven't drank for 2 years. Let's say you were an alcoholic, you haven't drank for 2 years. You go to a wedding, you have a champagne to toast the bride and groom, and then you think, oh, well, I might as well have a couple of beers, and then you have a bit of a slip. So you have the evening drinking, but then you wake up the next day with regrets, and you think, no, I made a mistake. That's it. And you literally straight back on the wagon with no problem. So that's a slip, yeah. And I think it's just important to know that, because that way you're not going to beat yourself up. But a relapse is where you're falling over and then you're falling over. Yeah. So let's get into it. So the stages of relapse, and the reason we want to understand the stages of relapse is relapse is not a process. It's not a single event. It's made up of a number of different things, and therefore, by knowing the stages of relapse, that way you can sort of have a proper workable relapse prevention strategy to hand, because you know where you are and what might be happening, and therefore you can take a different sort of action. So by understanding it, it's going to give you great power. Now, the early stages can happen in a different way. So the first stage, the purpose of understanding these three stages is allow you to look for the early warning signs that are going to get you back on track much quicker. The three stages are emotional, mental, and physical. Now, emotional relapse is where you're not really thinking about acting out or breaking your sobriety. You're not thinking about taking drugs or participating in the behaviors. However, what's showing up is your emotions or behaviors are setting you up for a possible relapse in the future. And it could be as simple as you're not following your plan. Whatever particular method that you are following to overcome your addiction, you realize that you're not doing it. Maybe you've stopped listening to your hypnosis recording, or you're not going to 12-step meetings, or you're not seeing your therapist, whatever it might be. So you can, when you sit down and think about it, you can see, I'm not actually doing that. It could even be that you're just not asking for help. You're not reaching out when you've got that craving or urge. You're not reaching out to help to someone, or not just talking to someone to get it off your mind. You're not moving your attention. Or maybe you're anxious. You can sense you're anxious all the time, or you're getting more angry. Sometimes it could be defensiveness, but it's going to be a combination of different emotions, mood swings. Maybe you're becoming less tolerant, or everything seems a problem for you. It's like you're maybe isolating yourself. And at the most basic level, what I often see when I'm looking in is people stop taking care of their health and their health. So it's bad habits around eating and particularly sleeping. So if you're living in this emotional zone too long, after a while, you start to feel really uncomfortable in your own skin. And when that happens, that's when you're going to start to think about acting out. That's when you start to think about taking your drugs or participating in your addictive behavior again. And when that happens, you suddenly move from the emotional relapse stage to what is called the mental relapse stage. Now, in the mental relapse stage, there's literally a war going on in your mind, because part of your mind wants to act out. It wants to participate in your addictive behavior or taking your addictive substance, and the other part doesn't. So you've got this back and forth. You're almost debating it. And you see, and when this starts happening, that is when you're going to start to becoming more concerned. Things are slowly getting out of control, because everyone's going to have those occasional thoughts of acting out. That's normal. But as you work through this, it's about stopping yourself. And it doesn't mean you will crash if you just think about it for a few moments. So it's understanding the stages will help you. But once you start thinking about the relapse, that is a mental warning, because that is moving you towards the physical relapse stage. Because once you're really starting to think about relapse, it won't take long to arrive at the physical relapse stage, because you've got all these thoughts going on in your head, and you start to thinking about taking that next drink, or your drugs, or participating in your behavior, going onto your porn site or to your gambling site, or you're really beginning to think about it and plan it. So you may even be fantasizing about it or glamorizing your past experiences in it. And that is where this whole thing is starting to get really dangerous for you, because these thoughts get stronger in the early days. You're managing them, but the longer you're in the stage, these thoughts are getting stronger and stronger, and you've got this screaming voice in your head to actually act out. Let's buy those drugs, let's get some porn, whatever it might be for you, for your addiction. It's getting louder and louder and louder, until eventually, really, you've got this voice screaming at you in your head, telling you to do it. And that is when you're likely to crash. And there's very little you can do that. We'll tell you what you can do at that stage later on, but you've almost lost it. And that's why understanding the three phases, understanding the link from the emotional to the mental to the physical, because you've got more chance at the earlier stages of stopping it. So if you're in emotional relapse, you can stop yourself getting to the next two stages. And even if you're in mental relapse, you can still stop yourself getting to the physical relapse, because that is where you're just about to act out. So let's think about some potential triggers, because again, the more you understand your triggers, the more you can plan to put them to one side. Now, these triggers, this is like the code in your head, because it's how you're responding. This is the subconscious way that you respond to whatever comes up. And one of the biggest stresses for any addict is stress. It's the biggest cause of a relapse. And remember, addiction is only the symptom. We're covering up some pain. And it may even be that you're using your addiction to really overcome stress anyway. So in that case, this is vitally important, because if your substance or behavioral abuse is really a coping mechanism, you're actually literally using it as a coping mechanism, it's going to be even easier for you to fall prey of stress when it comes up. So one way to prepare for this trigger is to really look at all the stress points in your life, and see if you can eliminate them. Is it a toxic relationship? Is it a financial issue? What are the aspects of your life that are creating that stress? Because by making changes in your lifestyle, you're actually going to remove the possibility of dropping back into relapse. Now, the second main area that causes the second biggest trigger point, I should say, which will cause a relapse, is people or places which are connected to your addictive behavior, whether that is substances or an actual behavior. Because if you've participated in a behavior, then you're going to have these potential triggers that are going to come up for a relapse. And it could be that it's people remind you of your drinking addiction, or it might be going to a particular place that then makes you want to drink or act out or buy drugs or gamble. So even family members can literally be a trigger for you, especially if they make you feel more childlike and vulnerable. So this is about really looking at all the people and places that could be potential triggers for you, because when you're reminded of that addiction, it's going to be vital that you have some effective ways in place. So the more you understand about the places you need to avoid, or the people, the better you're going to be. And what I suggest at this stage is you brainstorm ideas. So you've literally got a plan of activities that you could do instead of going to this particular place, or instead of spending time with this person. But also, so you've got answers, because a common one, certainly for drinkers, is or drug takers, is, well, let's go to that party, or let's go to the bar. That that's going to lead you down to a certain path. So if you've got an answer to that person, you've got a ready-made solution or reason that you can't make it, that is going to put you in a much healthier position. So think of healthy activities, think of healthy options that you could do instead of going to that place, or instead of meeting with that particular group of people, if it's going to push you down a particular route. Now, the next trigger is often seeing or sensing the thing associated with the addiction. So maybe for a cigarette smoker, it's smoke. If you go to the bar, and obviously lots of bars are non-smoking, but you've got the outside part. So it's like if you're going to a place where you can smell the cigarette smoke, that might be the trigger for you to smoke. Or if you go to a particular bar and it's next to you where you normally gamble, that might be the that trigger to make you sense that the gambling is just about to take place. So it's about really understanding how these implications affect you. It might be the smell of, you can smell the beer and it makes you want to have a beer. You go for a lunchtime meeting, but you could smell the wine or something. So you've got to really put yourself into a place where you don't have these memories or prompts that are going to put you back into your addictive state. And one of the biggest reasons that people relapse is actually they've got a poor self-care regime. And I'm going to link that to really the number one reason I see addicts fail is they haven't got a plan. They're just trying to do their recovery on willpower. So self-care really should equal, let's call it your reinvent program. It's reinventing yourself as a non-addict, a non-drinker, a non-drug taker, a non-gambler, whatever it might be for you. So self-care really should equal your recovery program or addiction recovery program, whatever you want to call it. So what is your plan? Because at the beginning I said, well, I'm going to tell you how never to relapse again. And this is it. See, if you've got a plan, your relapse prevention program is exactly the same as your original plan to overcome addiction. The two are one of the same. So it's all about what is your plan? Because if you've got your plan and you work your plan, even if you start to sort of come off course a little bit, when you become aware, you can get back on course and get back into your plan straight away. Now, this is a phenomenal process, and I learned this many, many years ago, and it's used in numerous addiction recovery centres. It's called the H.A.L.T process. And what it is that's an acronym for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Because when you are feeling one of these four states, then you're more likely to falter. You're more likely to have a relapse, because if you're hungry, that changes your state. If you're angry, it will change your state. So all of these four are four predominant states that can lead to a relapse. And it means your triggers are more likely to affect you when you're in any of these four states. So what I suggest is that you've got to take an inventory of these, take stock of them regularly. It's like check in with yourself. How are you feeling? Are you feeling hungry? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling lonely or tired? Because if you take stock of these four, these are four of the main drivers in terms of how you're feeling. So that really helped me. So if you have that in your arsenal as you go through your recovery and have that as part of your plan, knowing that and regularly checking with yourself and take stock, that will stop you relapsing in many, many cases. Another one is meditation. If you're feeling that craving, that urge, then go and meditate for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Get yourself out the zone and meditate. And there's so much scientific evidence about meditation. I've mentioned it in previous podcasts as well. I mean, I wasn't meditating as part of my original recovery. It's a practice that I have learned since, as I've openly said. I mean, I did learn to meditate many, many, many years ago, and I'd done it for 6 months and then I dropped it. But I've now been doing it for about 20 months now, daily, as well as I also have a monthly 4-hour meditation. So I do a 20-30-minute one every day, and what I call the 4 hours of silence once a month. So meditation is another great tool as part of your self-care toolkit, which will help you to prevent having a relapse. Now, this is a great one too. And what I suggest is, it's like, you don't need to do all of this. This is about a toolbox. What works for you? But another great thing is deep breathing. And I'm not going to try and teach you my method. What I would suggest is, there's so many different methods of deep breathing. It's like, find the one that works for you. There's loads of YouTube videos on deep breathing. One guy that has a free course is Wim Hoffman. I think he's Scandinavian. No, he's Dutch, a Dutchman. The Wim Hof method, and it changes. Deep breathing is obviously a fundamental, thing we need to do anyway. But if very few people are breathing properly, and by breathing deeply, even just 5 minutes a day, it would change your whole body, and it actually can reduce anxiety, which is obviously a trigger for addiction. So look up deep breathing, and there's lots of YouTube videos. As I said, I'm not trying to teach you it here. I'm just trying to give you the headlines which you can use within your relapse prevention method. Journaling is another one. Now, I'm not a regular journaler, but I do a gratitude journal every day. But I don't necessarily write about life in the way maybe a normal journaler would. But I often dialogue. By dialogue, it's just I'm talking to myself through different situations. So whatever works for you. But journaling, again, it's got lots of evidence of working particularly well. But again, all of this is really about repetition. You need to do these things regularly for them to really help you. So I want to just come back to the emotional, mental, and physical stages of relapse, because I've given you a ton of methods there. And obviously the key one is actually goes back to your whole plan. But let's just look at these 3 stages again, so you can understand maybe what you could do if you recognize you're at a particular stage of a relapse. So at the emotional stage, you're at that very early stage. So by recognizing it, you can maybe just realize where you could be anxious. Maybe it's as simple as you're being anxious, and you need to recognize that maybe some of your habits like sleeping and eating are slipping, and actually practice some real self-care. Because if you don't change your behaviors at the emotional stage, then it is going to get out of control, and that's when you drop into mental. So at the emotional stage, you can just take stock of where you are. You can use the whole methodology I gave you. You can really check in and make sure you're following your addiction recovery plan. Are you seeing your therapist? Are you listening to your hypnosis tape? Are you going to the 12-step meetings? Whatever it might be for you. Now, at the mental stage, obviously you've already got this voice looming in your head, where you're starting to really actively think about acting out. So therefore, you need to, at that stage, get deeper. And one thing you can do here is play that tape through your head. Play the tape of where you know what's going to happen. If you don't pull yourself out of this, you're going to end up down that rabbit hole again, because you've seen it all before. You have one drink and you can't stop, or you participate on your gambling once and then you can't stop until you lost all your money. Whatever it might be for you, for your particular addiction. So run that tape. The illusion that it's going to cause, the absurdity of that illusion, and you can stop yourself. You can also just pick yourself up, go for a walk, call a friend, go and get some exercise, distract yourself, use a self-directed neuroplasticity technique. Do whatever you can to just move your attention. Now, if you then drop down into the physical stage, and what I want to stress here is what you really want to be doing is you want to arrest this relapse at the emotional and mental stage. You definitely don't want to get to the physical stage. But if you did, really, the best way there of having any chance of coming out of it is self-directed neuroplasticity, which is learning how to redirect your attention. But the key point here is you want to be on top of your emotional state by checking in using the H.A.L.T method, making sure you're following your plan, your addiction recovery plan, so you don't get into a poor state. I just want to sort of say that, you know, relapse prevention is not complicated. I just wish I knew all of this information when I was on my journey, because your relapse prevention is really your addiction overcoming addiction plan. So whatever your plan is should be the same as your prevention plan. It's one and the same, and but its basic level, it's basic self-care. It's following your plan. Make sure you follow your plan every day and seek help when you need it, whether that's a therapist, a coach, or ringing a friend, you know, ringing someone, or going to a meeting. Share your feelings, get them out, get a good night's sleep, eat good nutritious food with no toxins in it. It's like, that is your basic plan. And I want to stress again, though, that, you know, relapse really should only be happening in your early part of your journey. You know, it's nothing wrong to be relapsing. I was relapsing multiple stages in the early part of my journey. But if you are, say, still relapsing and you've been following a plan diligently, let's say for 3 months, that's just an arbitrary period. But if you have not got a hold of your addiction after 3 months, then there's either something wrong with your plan, or you might not be working that plan. Yeah, this is about then taking ownership. You know, are you being 100% committed? Are you being 100% responsible? Because if you've got a plan which is proven to work, then you should be making progress after, say, 3 months. There's no reason, in my opinion, why you shouldn't be an ex-addict by the end of 3 months. So the point being, if you are still relapsing, there's nothing wrong. Right, let me say, there's nothing wrong if you're relapsing. You've just started on your journey, you're relapsing. That's fine. That's life. That is part of your learning, because you've got to learn some techniques to be able to overcome your addiction. That's a given. But if you have started that process, you've learned some techniques, and you still keep falling, then maybe you haven't learned the right techniques, or you're not applying them, or you're not working them 100%. So there's some tough love in there, because you can absolutely overcome addiction in 3 months. Remember that your thoughts are watering your mind. And what I would say is, overcoming addiction is not just about quitting or abstaining. It's actually much more about building a new life for yourself. It's really, I would say I've seen addiction as a blessing in many ways, because I've learned so much by my journey. So if you start building that new life because you've got a compelling future, you've got a really powerful why you want to achieve something, then that will get you to your end result, and you can live a great life. So I hope that's helped. So remember that your plan is the key. That there's absolutely no reason, once you've got past that initial stage, you should be relapsing, because if you're applying everything, you can really get out of it. So, but if you relapse, pick yourself up and go again, but get help, because that's should be telling you you can't do it alone. So if you get some help, they can shine the light on maybe where it's going wrong for you, or where something isn't working, because you can absolutely overcome addiction naturally. And the key to all of this is having a plan and working it and being 100% responsible and 100% committed, and then you'll get to your end result. So I hope this has helped. Please reach out if you can help, if I can answer any questions. And if you want some one-to-one help, then reach out either on my Facebook page, my YouTube channel, or even email me at graeme@graemehoppitt.com, and I'll be pleased to help. So know that you matter, know that you are more than enough, know that your recovery starts from within. You've got all the tools within you that you need. You might just need that little bit of help externally, but you can absolutely overcome your addiction naturally. Have a great day. Wishing you a fantastic day and an onward journey to your personal transformation.